issues that are really putting a big damper on everything we're trying to accomplish at Big Tree, and are going to create a major problem. I'm hoping that we'll find a resolution that's acceptable to everyone. We don't want to go back to the days where there was dissension and lawsuits and problems and all that kind of stuff. Has everybody read this, or most of us? At least it has a little bit of background so you understand what happened. And I'd like to introduce our board attorney, Sean Morrell, for those of you who haven't met him. This is Bob Woods, who's the president, the head of the CAM team, our association management company. And they will be playing a much more active role in the management of things at Big Tree. So we're working out the specifics. We're in the process right now of getting bids and evaluation of all the buildings that are in need of work. You know, we're just starting the second year of our 5-year plan to hopefully make Big Tree great again. Starting out, I was really, really enthusiastic. You know, having 7 board members, and we struggled through last year. I think we accomplished an awful lot, but it was tough. Most of the year we only had 2 or 1 board member, and it really was a whole lot to do and made it pretty difficult. We're going to move pretty quickly for a couple reasons. The major issues I think need to be covered by our attorney and explained in detail. And I also want to leave enough time for questions so everybody can ask their questions, make their suggestions, look at the ideas and the plan that Sean is proposing to hopefully resolve this issue, so we can hopefully all work together and continue and accomplish our goals. I mean, we're here because we all love the community. We want to see it get better and better, and we want to move forward. We don't want it stopped with litigation or people afraid to serve on the board of directors. We need a positive team working together, and that's the homeowners as well as the board, hopefully with 7 members as we voted. So I'm kind of going to go through just in a couple minutes a real quick review of 2016, a quick review of our financial report. If you look at the handout that was passed out, it has the agenda. I've got some times on here, and I don't want to run over on time. The second and third page is our December and year-to-date financial report, so we can look at exactly where we are financially, where we plan to be, and where we go in the future. The third page is a proposed budget for 2017. I think it makes a lot of sense. They did cut back in some of the spending areas, but I'm an optimist. We were able to accomplish a whole lot more last year than our budget provided because we did a very good job controlling costs. We were over $40,000 under our administrative costs, and we'll cover that in the financials. We also reduced the accounts payable problem dramatically by over $60,000, saving us over $50,000. So almost close to an additional $100,000 we were able to spend in building and repair. So that's a positive thing. Lastly, when we started the 5-year plan and ran for the board a year and a quarter ago or whatever, we put together a pledge to homeowners. Originally it was a candidate's pledge, and then we were voted in. It became the 2016 Board of Directors pledge. And I think it really speaks to a lot of the issues at this mediation settlement agreement, which really goes back to something that happened in 2011 with another contractor. But it really speaks to the issue of efficiency, cost control, honesty, integrity, and transparency. In other words, not doing things behind closed doors, not having deals that aren't kosher, making people aware of it. I'm sure you're aware that earlier this year we established a Big Tree website. So now we pretty much we've got all of our financial information, and that includes every dollar that goes out to pay for bills. So it tells you can look what the bill was for, what building was repaired, what work was done, how much it cost, who approved it. So there are really no secrets anymore. All the board meetings are on video. So if you didn't attend the board meeting and you want to review exactly what was covered, so we're putting everything we possibly can on to keep people thoroughly informed of what we're doing. And again, the goal of the plan right along has been to take our buildings primarily on a worst first basis, deal with emergencies up front, so when there's a leak or a major safety problem or issue, we deal with that immediately, and we've been doing a lot of that, and I think we've been fairly successful. We've corrected a lot of the safety problems, the landscaping problems, the signage problems, but again, the major emphasis has been on building and repairs. We spent $358,000 just on building, repairs, wood rot, and roofing last year, which is the most that's ever been spent on Big Tree since the community was built. And so again, this year we're focusing on the buildings that have not yet been repaired. We have 5 buildings this year that are going to have roofs replaced, and we decided last year, rather than doing things on a piecemeal basis, fixing this and then going on to the another building, and we're going to try to, when a building was re-roofed and new gutters put on, then we're going to take care of all the wood rot, we're going to take care of the coquina problems, have it all painted, and and thoroughly, almost like a new building on the outside. And from that point on, it should be good to go for a long time, and it becomes just an ongoing process of maintaining things properly, having it repainted and whatever, but not to have the continual cycle of wood rot every couple of years and replacing this piece and that piece, but really trying to renew the whole community. And the focus, again, this year is Bob Woods and Casey from the CAM team have got a team of contractors that have been out evaluating our buildings, determining the status, which buildings are in the most need, what specific repairs need to be done, submitting competitive bids, and we'll be presenting a plan for exactly where we're going to go this year. And we did a similar thing last year. As a matter of fact, there were big charts put up. If you look on the videos, I think it was a March board meeting, and this is just sort of a chart with the rating of each one of the buildings. On the website, it actually lists the schedule of the maintenance per building, both on the ones that have already been repaired, what the cost of the repairs was, exactly what was done, and the ones that are scheduled for the future. So we're basically updating that process to do it as effectively as we can, and to hopefully, again, the goal was to try to complete all the major repairs on the buildings by the end of the second year of our 5-year plan, and that, again, is the goal. I hope we're successful. One of the really encouraging things is the fact that after this year, there's only going to be one roof after we replace for the next 12 and a half years. And roofing is far and away the biggest expense that we have. When we put on the roofing and the new gutters, when we look at the budget, you'll see the huge amount of money that's spent. So what that really means is for 12 and a half years, we're going to be putting another $100,000 plus into the budget that's available for other things. So there's reason to be positive, and if things are managed on a proper basis, I think we're going to be able to make great progress in the future. But we don't want to get hamstrung with legal problems and not having a board to really handle the work that we have done. So I think we've done a lot in the past, and we have a lot of plans for the future. But again, we need a cooperative effort on the part of the board and the homeowners to work together to make it happen. So our goal is to again, be as fair to everyone as we possibly can, be totally transparent, have a sound business plan, everybody is kept informed of it, and to continue to move forward. Interesting, last year, in 2014 and 2015, for those that you were here, you realized that it was very, very difficult to impossible to sell a unit at Big Tree for reasonable cost. most of the sales were actually falling through because of the excessive amount of wood rot in the building, inability to pass the inspections, and the buyers weren't able to get mortgages. Now, that has really been turned around. We'll have 19 closed sales at prices that are 40 to 45% higher than they have been since like 2006, I think. So there's been a dramatic change in the environment. Realtors are now excited to come in here and bring their clients. They see the improvements that have been being made. We have made sure that no sale has fallen through, that everything that's needed to be done has been done. And again, the prices have been going up very, very significantly, and certainly want to continue it. As we continue to improve our community, we'll make it an even more desirable place to live as we start working on the infrastructure, the streets, the sewers, the lighting, irrigation systems, all the things that really are important in making Big Tree the beautiful community that it really can be. It's not to say it's not nice already, but again, there's still a lot of work to be done. So that's pretty much. We've been working, when we started out a year ago, we had just a ton of work orders that have never been answered, never been dealt with. We didn't know the status of them, and we've been working hard to put together a formalized work order process to make sure things didn't fall through the cracks, to make sure that homeowners got answers on their work orders, an explanation as to when it was going to be done, what the plan was. Louis Lira has spoken to that about board meetings. He's been working with Casey at the CAM team in order to fine-tune the program so that it's going to be readily available on the website and everybody can look at their individual situation. Obviously, the emergency issues, if you have a leak, we're going to be on it right away and get that repaired. If you have a serious hazard or safety program, obviously that's something that's going to be a high priority for us. There are a lot of issues that people have wood rot on a fence or a gate or something like that, and again, we have to prioritize because again, we still have some buildings that have very serious work that needs to be done. So the intention is to focus on completing that work, and then as we move down the line, really to basically get everything done and be at the point where in an ideal situation, we're more on a maintenance schedule. So when you call in with a problem on your building, you call the CAM team and they're going to get on the phone and have a maintenance person come out and fix it right away. You're not going to be put on a big waiting list, even if it's not an emergency. So that was obviously our long-term goal. Let's just look real quickly at the financial reports, because again, I want to focus the bulk of our meeting on dealing with the issues that we have and the legal problems, and have Sean speak about it. Our goal, as announced at the annual meeting and previously, was to end the year at about a $60,000 balance, but no lower than $50,000. As you can see, our cash balance was $63,289.77 at the end of the year, so we did a little better than planned. We did have a lot of additional costs with that Hurricane Matthew problem that came through, but we still did pretty well. We've got $82,000 in overall assets. We indicated that we expected to have final costs of about $350,000 in total repairs, and the actual number is $358,769, which is 82.4% of our total $430,000 budget, which is the bulk of our money has been focused on doing important repairs for Big Tree. So that is made up of three areas. The building maintenance, you look at the year-to-date number, was $200,801. The WDO was $35,000, and the roofing was $122,542. So if you add it up, again, we spent even more money than than we planned, but we finished with a little bit more money in the bank than we planned, which is a good combination. We got a proposed budget, which is on the next page for 2017, adjusted for our current situation. I think it's a sound, sensible budget. Again, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to save money in a number of areas and even focus more money on completing the building and repairs. But it compares our actual budget for 2016, the actual amount of money we spent category by category, and the proposed budget for 2017. So we want to, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it. Again, my major focus is getting as much done as we possibly can with our team to improve the community and making sure we don't run short of cash, so we never go below 50, and we haven't gone below 60,000, so which is pretty positive. But we need to take a formal vote. We have a quorum of board members here, which is right now just two of us, myself and Chester Brown. So CAM team needs an approved budget in order to do our finances for January. So it's important that we do it. If anybody has any questions or you want to talk about.
I have an objection to that because you have to have a minimum of 3 board members.
Yeah.
So you won't be able to vote.
Yeah, you don't need to pass the budget tonight. We can do that at the next meeting.
Okay.
It's been presented to everybody and we can review it, talk about it.
Okay. Well, that's all said. It's been presented. The next section is number 6, which is our new business, which basically talks about the issues discussed in our email blast, which is basically the legal issues that have been raised, as well as the resignation of the majority of our board members and developing a plan. Where do we go from here? How do we move forward to get things done in a logical, positive way that's going to benefit the homeowners and everyone else? You can't do it without a board. So, Sean?
Thank you, Larry. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sean Morrell, HOA condo attorney, legal counsel for your association. First and foremost, I apologize if I'm coughing, clearing my throat. I had a very sick 3-year-old ended up in mommy and daddy's bed last night. Unfortunately, I think I'm next on the list. I'll do a very brief background of sort of the legal issue we're facing. I see a lot of similar faces from the meeting when I was here in November, but I see a few faces I don't recognize, so just as a very brief recap. There was a lawsuit in 2012 brought by some homeowners. I wasn't around at that time. I wasn't involved in the lawsuit on either side. I think based on what I've read, clearly there were some wrongdoings going on or improper actions, or at least the fear of that by some parties, because there was a maintenance settlement agreement, which I'll refer to as an NSA, reached by the parties. It did involve a pretty substantial payback by a contractor to the association. Generally, a company's not going to pay a bunch of money unless they did something wrong. So my point in that is I think there were some very valid concerns and allegations occurring back then. Really, the current issue is, that's back in 2012, so why are we talking about this in 2017? Well, one of the mandates of the MSA, and I'm going to quote it here, was that the association was to hire a management company, and this is the quote, to manage affairs of the association, excuse me, including but not limited to building and grounds maintenance. Interesting, there were no further specifics to that. It wasn't fleshed out or detailed beyond that. It wasn't management company does this, board does that. In my opinion, the spirit of the MSA, the spirit of the agreement was to change the culture from 2012 that allowed what occurred to occur. There was a lack of transparency. I think the goals of the MSA were to make things transparent, bring an objective third party or an intermediary in, being the management company who can be involved in maintenance, which is the biggest issue you all face in Big Tree. Prevent favoritism. You know, the buildings are getting fixed because the board president is having his building fixed. I think those kind of things have been alleged to have been going on. And remove improper actions. I don't think the goal of it was zero involvement from the board whatsoever in maintenance. That's just not realistic, particularly forever, in perpetuity. And there's no expiration date to the MSA. And I've actually talked to the opposing counsel in the case, the attorney representing the claimants in that case, and he agreed with that. I mean, his quote to me was, the goal here wasn't to create so much red tape that maintenance can't be done or that it's too expensive for your community. But it became sort of problematic because, again, the clause is just hire a management company to manage affairs, including maintenance. So what does that mean? The recent events and kind of how we got here was, as you know, you had a newly elected board in November. One of the board members, a few of the board members raised the concern, if the board's involved in maintenance, are we violating that MSA provision? I think you can make an argument you are, just because it was worded so vaguely. I think it could have been drafted a little more carefully or a little more defined, and it would have solved some of the problems we have today, but unfortunately, that's not what we're facing. There was concern about the MSA provision being violated and whether that could lead to liability, either as to the association, future lawsuits, or even personal liability as to a director, which I'll talk about in a little bit. On January 25th, I was not here, the board met. There was a proposal put forth about some new maintenance procedures, documenting the way maintenance is going to be done, the involvement of the board, the establishment of a committee, those kind of things. I think it came from a really good place to try to cement this, or to plug up this hole. You know, what does that mean? Again, the term manage is pretty broad. I don't at all think that means the board can't be involved. Boards have to be involved in the community's maintenance. There's no other way to do it. On January 25th, that did not get passed. There was some concern that the procedures were a little too onerous, where the management company may not be able to operate them. Again, I wasn't here, but I know it did not pass. And subsequent to that, 5 of your 7 board members resigned. So you currently only have 2 board members, so you don't even have a quorum right now, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit as well. Just very quickly, the goal here is not to mandate anything to the membership. The board's not here to tell you how maintenance is going to be done moving forward. We're not voting or approving anything today. It's really kind of an information session, if you will, a chance to have a Q&A and bring your concerns out. There's been a lot of emails and email blasts going back and forth, so I'm glad to see so many homeowners here, and that's really the goal here, is to talk about what the board and I and Bob have been discussing as a potential solution for this in the long term, and solicit input from you all to hopefully head it in a positive direction. And again, the goal is to get everybody on the same page for the future of Big Tree. I mean, the infighting and the litigation and the just constant issues here, I think hamstring is a great word. It is hamstringing what you all need to accomplish. And so it's important to address the concerns and try to resolve them, but it's important to try to get all the parties on the same page, and even the other attorney used that quote with me as well. So what we've discussed in terms of future plans. Number one, we have to comply with the MSA. I mean, that's unquestionable. That's black and white. If we violate the MSA, it is a court, it's not a court order, but it's authorized by the court. It's enforceable through the court. So if the Big Tree Association is found to be violating the MSA, that could bring liability. So we need to figure out what the solution to that is. And I think everybody, those I've spoken with, even those directors who have resigned, agree that the solution there is to come up with formalized procedures for handling maintenance that most importantly are documented. I think there's been based on what I've learned since I've come on board in November, there's been substantial improvement since 2012. A lot of the things that led to that climate that allowed those improper actions, in large part, have been resolved. You guys have a great website where even receipts and bills are posted. Not a lot of communities have that. There was a plan of the community kind of triage on which buildings are more important to make the selection of that be more objective and less subjective. But I've noticed very strikingly, it's not documented. There's no set procedures. Here's how we operate. Once you have it in writing, then you can operate under that procedures, and you can hang your hat on the fact that we've passed these, we believe they're reasonable, and here's how we're going to operate. So the goal is really to create formalized, documented procedures. And we don't have those. I don't have any to present tonight. We really need to work together to come up with those. It's not something the board needs to create, pass, and mandate on you all. It's important that you all have an input on that as well, a chance to see them before they're passed. And if you have an issue with something, raise that issue, and potentially we can work it, make it something that, you know, resolves the issues and makes everyone happy so that you guys can get on the same page again. Again, it's important to point out that the MSA clause is very vague. There's no concrete parameters. There's no mandated specific procedures. I don't think it means the BOD can have no involvement. Again, back to sort of the spirit of what it was trying to resolve. That's what we need to do, is come up with procedures that are going to do that. Another very important part too is once we get there, this community, this board, this membership's community has to move forward with confidence and stop being guided by the continual threat of litigation. And that's what's happening year after year after year. A new board comes on, other people sue, other board comes on, other people sue. And the threat of litigation is going to get you all nowhere. So once you get to a point that you have procedures in place that we believe are reasonable, they're fair, they solve those issues of favoritism, of things being done behind closed doors and not being transparent. Once we've got that documented and everybody's on board with that, and we've got a management company filling in the role that we believe complies with that mandate to have them managing the affairs of the association, you all have to operate under those with confidence moving forward. You can't fear the threat of continued litigation. You can't stop people from filing lawsuits. Everyone has the right to do that. However, if you believe if we have the right procedures in place and we vetted them correctly and we're implementing them correctly, we'll prevail in court if we're sued in the future by homeowners. And so it's an important goal to get to that, and that's why it's important, you know, I hope there are no more lawsuits. I hope we can bring everybody together and solicit everybody's concerns and come up with procedures that make not only the board feel confident, but you all feel confident. Then there should be no lawsuits. But assuming there is a lawsuit, we have to fortify enough to know that if we went into a court of law, we're going to prevail. And once we get there, you all need to move forward with confidence, not this kind of continued turmoil. I want to talk a little bit about the liability aspect of this, because that was really what raised this to the forefront and led to a lot of the directors resigning. Liability, by its very nature, requires improper conduct. Whether you're talking liability to a personal director like Larry, or whether you're talking about it to the corporate entity, you know, the Big Tree Association, Inc., there has to be improper conduct there, or at least negligence on the association side. In terms of personal liability to a director, there's very strong protection in the state of Florida, in fact everywhere, which is referred to as the corporate veil. It's very hard for you to get sued as an individual. Well, take that back, anyone can sue anyone. It's hard for you to get hit with a claim of liability personally when you serve as a director on a corporation. In order for that to happen, you have to have willful misconduct or malfeasance. They're the kind of things you lay up at night and you know you did something wrong. You embezzled money, you hired a contractor who's giving you kickbacks under the table. Those kind of things can rise to personal liability. What the board, since I've been involved in November, has been trying to do in creating these procedures is the exact opposite of malfeasance and willful misconduct. They're actively working on creating procedures to comply with that MSA. So I think the idea that if one of you were to volunteer to serve on the board tomorrow, you could be hit with personal liability, some sort of money judgment against you or have your credit hurt, I think it's purely erroneous. I think it would take additional future improper conduct for that to ever be the case. And I think the concern of that, yeah, if you don't mind, I'm almost done, and then we're going to have a Q&A, where, you know, anybody's welcome to say what they'd like to say. The hypothetical that led to that wasn't erroneous, however. If we didn't create these formalized procedures, if the board just continues to be the sole party in charge of doing maintenance, and the MSA provision says a management company is to be the manager of maintenance, then could that be intentional misconduct? It potentially could, and so that's how we got here. But I think the concern of liability grew to be bigger, grew to really guide this, when what we're really trying to do is create these procedures to eliminate that in its entirety. And so I really wanted to express to everybody, particularly the directors who resigned, what you all are doing is born from a good place and it's headed to the right place, and it's not something that's going to subject you to liability unless you have additional future improper conduct. And that was just something that was important to me to try to clarify. In addition, I've spoken with the attorney for the claimants from the 2012 lawsuit. We spoke 2 days ago, we spoke this morning. He wrote me an email today, said that his client is not interested in suing any director personally. In fact, he's not interested in suing anybody at all. He's willing to be part of this process to review these procedures before we implement them, in case he still has some concerns. Hey, I don't like the way this is. I don't think this complies with the spirit of the MSA. So he's on board with trying to resolve these things, and that's my goal, not just here tonight, but in the near future, is to resolve these things and prevent litigation, but again, get a concrete plan in place so that if litigation happens, we can confidently defend it. There is one last twist to it, and that is your D&O coverage from your insurance, your director and officers coverage. It's kind of strange, but you have a specific exclusion in your D&O policy for any claim related to that 2012 lawsuit in the MSA. What that means in layman terms is if somebody sued a director personally, there's no coverage there should a judgment ever come to them. Now, D&O coverage by its very nature does that. If you're serving on board, you were trying to do things the right way, but something went wrong, damages were suffered, you got a judgment against you, your D&O policy kicks in and pays that judgment. It's extra protection for directors. You don't have that because of this odd exclusion in your D&O policy, and I think that's in large part what led to concern from a lot of directors of, whoa, do I want to serve if I don't have D&O coverage? Not there. I find it very odd that 5 years later that exclusion's still there. I spoke with an individual today who has an insurance company. They specialize in HOA condo law. I didn't mention your name or any of the names of claimants or lawsuits. We spoke in very general terms. But he too thought that was very strange, and his suggestion, and I've already addressed it to Larry today, but I'm going to bring it to the board in the future. I think you all need to seriously consider pursuing new D&O coverage. That needs to be in place. And because there's no end date to the MSA, in essence, you're never going to have D&O coverage again. And again, that's a really technical thing, but it's something I wanted to bring out. It's a separate issue regardless of this whole maintenance thing. That hole, that gap in coverage needs to be filled, and it's something that we're going to look into. So what does this look like? What are the next steps in this process? Well, first of all, you need to fill your board. As Lisa pointed out, you don't have a quorum. Without a quorum, you can't take action. In fact, you could potentially have someone go to a court of law and ask for a receivership to take over your community, which is not a road you want to go down. It's very costly. You give up control of your community. You don't want to do that. So at the very least, you need one more director. It would be great to get back to 7 directors. Under your bylaws and under Florida statute, whenever there's a vacancy, which you now have 5, the remaining board members have the right to appoint directors. So the board, in the very near future, is going to need to appoint directors. I'm hoping they're going to be able to appoint 5. So I'm encouraging you and neighbors that aren't here, if you're interested in serving on the board, please let Larry or Bob know. I don't know what the exact procedure is going to be for making them aware. But whether you were a previous director who's recently resigned or whether you're somebody who's never served before, if you're interested in serving, please let them know, because out of the crop of volunteers, they're going to need to select 5 to appoint to the board. We're going to need to at least select 1, or it's going to be very problematic for you. And then very soon, they will hold a special meeting to appoint those directors formally at a board meeting. So I would think maybe an email to Larry, or if there's a means of communication to let you know if you're interested. I again encourage you, you're not going to sign up today and get hit with personal liability tomorrow. The very nature of this project we're tackling goes against the idea of willful misconduct and malfeasance. It's the exact opposite of that. And I can very confidently tell you you're not going to be hit with liability unless there's future improper conduct by the board. And that's what we're here to resolve, to make sure that doesn't happen again. So what is the work on the new procedures? Again, it's not going to be mandated. It's not going to be done behind closed doors. I mean, by its very nature, I think the board's going to have to come up with a draft of here's what I think the procedures look like. But I've encouraged Larry, and I think the board's on board, that once we have those procedures, okay, here's the draft. The board thinks this is good. It complies with the spirit of the MSA. It involves the management company. It gets rid of the favoritism. It makes things transparent. It gets bids properly. Invoices are being paid and monitored properly. Once we have that structure, I'm going to encourage setting a meeting, not to approve it, but to present it, and present it to everybody in the room or in advance. Let all of you look at it, consider it, and see if you're comfortable with it, or if you have other suggestions or concerns, solicit that input and see if we can come up with procedures that satisfies everyone. At some point, and in addition, we will involve the other attorney Eric Kolar, in that process as well. Present it to him, see if he has any issues. Again, he represents the claimants from that original action. So if there's going to be issues with that, going back to the spirit of the MSA, he was there back then, I wasn't. I want that input too, and we're going to get that input. So I know I'm kind of beating a dead horse, but that's the goal here. It's not us telling you what's going to happen. It's let's all get back on the same page and solve these problems so you can put them behind you and move forward. And then again, once it's in place, we've got to operate confidently. We can't operate with the continued fear of litigation. We need to move forward in a positive direction and have confidence in the fact that this process has resolved those concerns, it's complied with the spirit of the MSA, and should litigation ever be brought back on that MSA, we will prevail. And once we're there, I mean, to put it very bluntly, we need to put that behind us and move forward. So that's where we are. We don't have that procedure drafted. That's going to be the next step. I don't know exactly when that's going to happen. It's going to take substantial work. I encourage you all to give your thoughts, give your concerns, give your opinions. I encourage you to run for the board. I mean, this is your community. You need good board members. You need good directors, and we need to get on the same page. So that's really all I wanted to say. And other than that, I'm really here if anyone else would like to ask questions or give their. I'm sorry, you did raise your hand first.
Yeah. Well, I think first off, for all making this community a better community, we don't need to worry about, or nor should we ever have to worry about litigation to make that happen. Number two, I think what we ought to do is have an ad hoc committee formed with the input of you and the other attorney who's managing this litigation to draft those procedures that we need to address what the major concerns are of that agreement.
I think that's a great idea.
This might interrupt for 1 second. We've actually talked about that, and we're all in favor of actually having an ongoing maintenance committee. So we'd love 2 or 3 homeowners to work with the board in making that process work. In other words, implementing it on a day-to-day basis.
Both the drafting of the procedures and future meetings.
Yeah, and future.
The third thing is, those board members, if there are any of them here that have resigned, I would suggest they reinstate themselves.
And let me just do a comment, because I meant to say that.
Yeah.
I meant to say that earlier. I didn't want to imply that any board member that resigned did something wrong. Number one, I respect anybody's right to resign for whatever reason you want
They
to.
were concerned, yes.
It's a volunteer position and it's a difficult one. So whenever somebody wants to resign, that's not a negative jab towards them at all. And particularly in the climate that had been created since November, I don't blame directors who chose to resign. So I meant to point that out earlier. I didn't want to vilify directors who had resigned, but I agree with you. I'm hopeful that those that were elected, which are obviously supported by a majority of your community, will come back and serve as well.
Yeah, and from that, we can have a forum on particular things we need to have a forum on, like the budget and so forth. But, you know, I'm here because I love the community and I want to see the community grow. I want to see it be stronger. I want to see our things be developed. I don't think we have to go to court to make those things happen. That's foolish and it's costly and it's non-productive. I guarantee you that. It's very non-productive.
I mean, there's good litigation and bad litigation. I mean, based on the 2012 lawsuit I read, I think there were some serious issues in your community that litigation helped resolve.
But
I
that was
agree.
solved.
Right, the continued threat of litigation becomes a detriment to the community.
Right.
There's no doubt about that. Ms. Walker?
Sean, are you paid by Big Tree or the CAM team?
Great question. I represent homeowner associations and condo associations. I've never represented the CAM team or any management company, nor would I. So I'm paid by the Inc. Big Tree Association. I don't represent management companies. I obviously have relationships with management companies because that's generally how I grow my practice. You build a relationship with a management company and they introduce you to different communities. But in answer to your question, my client is the association, and in fact, I'd be barred as a conflict of interest in representing somebody like the CAM team.
So you're confident that, going by Larry's word, that if future litigation were to occur, there would be no malfeasance?
No, that wasn't Larry's word, that's my word. I'm extraordinarily confident that if we operate under the plan that I haven't formulated, I mean, it actually started with Mr. Jasper and some other former board members working, but this ongoing plan, yes, I'm extremely confident that if the correct procedures are put in place, documented, and we operate under them, we would prevail in court on a future lawsuit. Very much so.
So why wasn't that done last year?
It's a good question. I also, you know, to be frank with you, and I don't really want to turn it into a this team versus this team kind of thing, but I was struck by the timing in it all. Last year's board wasn't operating with documented procedures. 2014's board wasn't operating with documented procedures. 2013's, 2012, immediately after the MSA, wasn't operating with documented procedures. So why is it suddenly the threat of litigation today? What changed today from 2012? I don't know, I haven't been around. But in answer to your question, I don't know why these procedures weren't put in place, and boy, it seems like it would have saved you guys from a lot of strife had they been put in place in 2012. But none of us have a time machine, so we've got to do it now. But that's a great point. Why is it happening now? Or I think the better question is, why didn't these formalized procedures occur 5 years ago? I don't know. It's a good question.
How do we get the answer to that?
I don't know the answer to that.
I mean, what
Can I have a
difference,
question,
excuse
do you
me,
know?
but the mediation settlement agreement was actually signed March 21st, 2014, not 12.
Okay, not 12. Okay, the lawsuit
It was
filed in 12.
concerning issues in 12.
Gotcha.
But the mediation settlement, and CAM was not hired until the summer, July 1 of 14.
Okay.
So the 14, and the, as far as I know, the paperwork that they signed was good for 2 years. The contract with CAM was for 2 years, so it's actually run out in 16, the summer of 16.
Okay.
And then they said they've just extended it, I guess, kind of verbally, because I don't think they have.
I think I actually was provided a campaign extension contract.
Okay.
But if it wasn't 2012, it was 2014, it still begs the same
Yeah.
question. Why
Oh,
were these
exactly.
procedures created 2014,
Absolutely.
2015?
It wasn't 5, it's 3.
Yeah.
So
Now, I will
it's been 3
say,
years.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah,
I
no,
will
that's
say there
okay.
has been positive progress insofar as some of the issues that led to that culture that led to the lawsuit have been somewhat eliminated.
Exactly. Contractor's history.
Yeah.
That was a bit.
The contractor's gone.
But the connection was the contractor and the board.
There had to be
That was
something.
the issue.
Yeah, there had to be something.
Yeah.
A company doesn't pay $25,000 if they didn't do something wrong.
And that was probably just a very small portion of it.
Yeah, and that contractor's gone. The lack of transparency is in large part gone. You have one of the most active websites I've seen at an HOA. That's awesome. Transparency is great. It's a great
I'd like to say something about the website.
Excuse
if I
me, can
may.
we take a turns here, or is anybody just going to talk out? I'm trying. Oh,
Go ahead.
thanks, Lisa. I just have a quick question, Sean,
Yes,
about
ma'am.
the D&O.
Yes, ma'am.
Again, clarifying the liability of it. We are not a condo association. We're not a condo. How do those rules decipher between a townhome fee simple versus a condo in the rules and laws and whatever under a D&O liability?
It's a good question. You have a very interesting structure here. I think Chuck Klein, who was the first person I met in your community, referred to it as a landominium, which I never heard that term. It's kind of interesting. And I do a lot of condo work as well. I actually love 718 more than 720. I enjoy working with condos just from a legal basis more than I do HOAs. The laws are tighter, easier to operate under. D&O coverage applies to any corporate entity. So the board of Coca-Cola has D&O coverage. You guys, as you know, are a corporation, a non-profit under 617 of the Florida statutes. So the directors have D&O coverage of any corporation. So to answer your question, ma'am, they don't. The D&O coverage doesn't really differ. The involvement of the directors differs. In your typical HOA, fee simple, like you said, I'm not repairing your roof, me being the board. I'm not repairing the housing. Maybe we're telling you you can't have a giant boat on your front driveway, but we're not involved in condo repair and common element ownership like you are in a condo. So it doesn't change the flavor of D&O coverage, but I think it changes the involvement of directors with their owners. I mean, you do operate much more like a condominium. You really do. So again, I think heightens the need for formalized maintenance procedures. And
So,
a typical HOA, you wouldn't need that.
To understand that, if one of the premises for why the majority of the board quit, because if I'm hearing you correctly, it's due to they were fear of the liability potential?
There was absolutely a fear of liability.
Okay, and so moving forward, why would anyone else want to take that role as well without something being...
Great question, and again, I'd love to address that again. The fear of liability, if I'm afraid I'm going to be hit with liability, much personal liability for volunteering on a corporation, I'm not going to either. But I'd again reiterate that, number one, even liability adds to the association, the Inc., not Larry, not Chester, but the Inc.
I understand.
Takes improper conduct, or at the very least negligence. As long as you're operating correctly, you can't be hit with liability, or you're not negligent. The corporate veil protection adds an additional layer. You can't pierce it with negligence. It's got to be willful misconduct. It's got to be a criminal act. Arguably reckless negligence, I mean gross negligence, it's a gray area, but the point is you have to be doing something wrong. So my point is that the initial discussion that started in November of can we come up with a hypothetical where a director is held liable? Putting my lawyer hat on, we were able to connect enough dots and said, you know what, if we don't create procedures, we don't get the CAM team involved with maintenance, the board does it on their own, does that potentially violate that clause from the MSA? Could you deem that willful misconduct and therefore be personal liability? Sure, ... I think that then snowballed out of control, and there became the sentiment that if I serve on the board tomorrow, I'm writing a check out of my bank account on Friday. And I just think that's completely erroneous. It's just not realistic. I think in order for there to be, let me step back. What we're going through this process is the antithesis of willful misconduct. We're not running from the MSA clause, we're not ignoring the MSA clause, in fact we're tackling it head on, we're working with opposing counsel, we're going to create a document, a procedure that we believe complies with the spirit of the MSA, and I keep using the word spirit because the language is so vague, it gave us no parameters. So we just got to go back and say, okay, let's get rid of behind closed door stuff, let's get rid of improper contractor relationships, let's get a CAM team in who's paying invoices, reporting it to the community, getting proper bids, all that. Once we get that in place, if there was a lawsuit, I'm very confident we'd prevail in the lawsuit, even for the Inc. I think the odds of there being personal liability are slim, and if we do it properly, nil.
Huh?
Yes, sir.
Let me ask one question. I think that the people that resigned were concerned with being personally legally challenged.
Fair enough.
And having to go through all of the pain and crap that you
Sure.
have to go through with that. So how do we overcome that particular concern?
Great question. And one of the reasons I brought up the D&O gap, and one of the reasons I'm going to work very actively with the board, we have to get that coverage in place. Because the reality is anybody can sue anybody. I can file a lawsuit against my neighbor tomorrow and they have to defend it, even if it had no merit to it. Now there's checks and balances to that. Under 720, you have an entitlement to attorney fees if you're the prevailing party. So if somebody files frivolous lawsuits, if we prevail, they're going to pay not only their attorney fees, but our attorney fees. That is the checks and balances that prevents people from filing frivolous lawsuits under 720. The problem is you still have to defend the lawsuit. And when you have D&O coverage in place, if Chester as an individual gets sued, your D&O company provides an attorney to defend it. With that gap in coverage, you don't have that attorney available to you. Right. So I think a paramount goal is filling that gap and getting D&O coverage in place.
Okay. So
and now, it still doesn't prevent your name from being on a caption of a lawsuit, but it really mitigates and almost eliminates it affecting you monetarily, or really even affecting you kind of time-wise, because you're going to have counsel, duty to defend from your D&O coverage. Great question. Yes, ma'am.
Have you looked at any of the videos from the meetings? Have you watched any videos from the meetings?
No, ma'am.
Why?
I'm going to suggest that you watch the May 2016 meeting, the video.
Okay. I'm huge on moving forward, not looking backwards, but if you think it would be worthwhile to watch
Well, then
the
you
May
will,
meeting,
when
I'd be
you watch
happy
that
to.
meeting, you will understand why people are concerned about this, the favoritism.
Okay, absolutely. I
Well,
May
now
12th,
we're back to
2016.
favoritism again?
Yeah, I'd be,
Oh, God, God.
Yeah, but you know, again, and I agree that there's been concerns about that for years, and that's one of the paramount things these procedures need to address. For example, and I'm not going to be the one who creates these procedures. I'm not a contractor, I'm not a CAM, I'm not a board president. I provide legal analysis on these things and guidance. I'm going to be involved in the process, but those procedures are going to need to be created by the board, the CAM team, and you all, the membership. And Mr. Kolar as well. I'd like his input, anybody else's input. But eliminating favoritism is one of the paramount goals. And you don't do it by just putting a banner up that says we don't use favoritism. You do it by implementing procedures that don't allow favoritism. For example, if you have contractors come and do a triage report of your community, which it seems like you've done, but perhaps we need to do that again. Maybe have 3 contractors do triage reports. Figure out the most objective triage report that says building X is the most paramount one that needs work now. It doesn't matter if they just moved in last week or if they're the board president, it's going to be the building that gets worked on first. I think that's a great example of how procedures can help eliminate those kind of concerns like favoritism. And that's the goal. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, the DOA?
DNO, yeah, director and officer.
Okay. If, in order to approve that policy or, put it in force, make it complete, don't we need a quorum?
Yes.
To vote that?
In order to do anything moving forward, we're going to need a
Okay,
quorum.
so then, in other words, you're saying we need another board member tonight in order to implement that tomorrow so that any new board member, their butt is covered.
Yeah, it's a great point, but we're not actually taking any board action tonight, so we won't be doing that tonight. But yes, we're sort of frozen in time until we get a quorum on the board. And in fact, if you don't get a quorum on the board, your next lawsuit's going to be for receivership, and it'll be successful. Florida statute's very clear. If you fail to have enough board members to have a quorum, you're entitled by law to have a receiver appointed. That's a process that I've seen occur before, and everybody loses. So we desperately need to get a quorum. And the first thing is volunteers. They can't appoint somebody who doesn't want to serve. So my only suggestion for action tonight would be if any of you are willing to serve, please let Larry or Bob know that on your way out the door. And I can promise you we can work to fill the gaps that are of the biggest concern right away. For example, the lack of DNO coverage. If that's something that would prevent you from being concerned, well then let's not take any substantive steps as an association until we get that gap filled. Let's not repair any more roofs. Let's not do any more work orders. Let's not amend our documents until we get that gap filled. That's a paramount issue that I'm going to be working on. And then these procedures too. I recommend you do no maintenance other than somebody's, a comet falls through somebody's roof tonight until we get these procedures in place. I do not think it would be wise to continue with phased maintenance until we iron this out.
I have one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
Why can't we go to management companies and say to them, what can you do for us? Instead of, and then start with that point and then go back to, okay, this is what we want.
Meaning, can you solicit feedback from management companies on how they can solve these problems?
Yes.
Not
I
their
don't think
job.
there's anything negative to that process at all, if that's something you want to do.
Because wouldn't that be a starting point to find out how a management company can work with us?
How they work with other people.
And work with other people,
Sure.
what we need, and then you fine tune it and you see what,
Why reinvent the wheel?
Absolutely, and I think that's a very good part about why it's so important to solicit everybody's input, whether it's management companies, whether it's Bob's company, whether it's Mr. Kolar's or your opinion. So listen, I agree, let's not
Say
reinvent
as
the
many
wheel.
as 5 management companies and get them to give us proposals, come to the pavilion, have a meeting, have people show up, ask them questions. If we're all going to be involved and it's our property that's getting worked on, I think we all should be able to participate. Don't you?
In fact, that's what I'm here to encourage, is for everybody to participate, solicit as much opinion as possible. I will say that,
Well,
in my opinion-
I have gone to the last 2 or 3 meetings. There were probably 5 people there.
yeah,
This is the biggest crowd they have had simply because of Larry's flyer up there. There were no, all of a sudden people, you know, resign.
That's not
And,
true.
You know, but
But I-
pavilion meeting, there were 5 of us there.
No, there wasn't.
There's more than that.
There was more than that.
I will say that there's a,
Except for the
Stop
board
lying.
members. Except for the board members.
I will say that there is a, and I expressed this very strongly in advance of January 25th, which I think was part of the reason that didn't pass that night and led to a lot of directors resigning. I'm very concerned about a cart before the horse problem, and that would be if you put in procedures that are too onerous for a management company to handle it, or being willing to handle it at a realistic cost.
Exactly.
And the CAM team says, I can't do this, and they leave, and you go to 5 others, and they say, we can't do it either, we live. Hands down, the bigger mandate of that MSA is you must have a management company.
Yeah.
That is a higher level mandate than these maintenance procedures. So I strongly suggest we need to iron out the maintenance procedures we think we need, and then make sure that a management company, hopefully the CAM team or whoever you choose, can operate under them and then implement them. It would be very dangerous to implement them in advance of making sure we're all on the same page and it can be done.
Okay.
And even Mr. Kolar expressed that to me.
Who's the appropriate person to pick up the phone and call 3 or 4 management companies other than CAM and say, hey, how about participate? You want to participate? You want to give us an estimate? Give us a proposal. See what they can do. I mean, you know,
Try it.
more than one person should be doing this. I mean, I realize.
I would suggest almost anybody.
7 people, yeah.
I'd suggest almost anybody to do it. I work with lots of management companies, and
Right.
they're eager to get in new communities, just like I am as legal counsel.
Absolutely.
I've had board presidents or membership owners call me and say, hey, we're having these issues, we don't really like our legal counsel, is there any way you'd come chat with us? And free of charge, I just go out there and meet with them, give them some
Right.
thoughts. I'm not their lawyer yet, but it's a business opportunity for me, so I'm eager to do
Why
it.
don't you give Larry a list of 3 or 4 management companies that you know that you work with, and maybe you call them up and maybe we could.
First of all, the
start something.
contract's not even
Does
ended
that make
yet.
sense?
I do agree with you, there's no harm in extra input, no doubt about that.
Right.
The only thing that I disagree with a little bit is that, and again, I'm not really here to make operative decisions about which management company you're going to use, I'm here to give legal advice, but that inherently implies you're switching management companies.
Exactly.
And as long as your current management company can handle the job, I don't see what the need is to
Well,
switch
but Larry
management.
has repeatedly told us at the other meetings, at the last few meetings, that CAM cannot do what we want them to do, or that it would not be cost effective. And so the idea is, you know, get some competition here. Get 2 or 3 people competing on the same business, and let's see what they can come up with.
Sure, sure.
My husband was in business his whole life.
I mean, that's really a discussion
You know,
for
give me
the
the best
membership and the board
price,
more
yeah.
than me, but yeah, I agree with you. I don't think the concern, and you know, Bob and I have discussed the original proposal. The CAM team is a full-fledged management company that can handle management procedures. I work in, gosh, I want to say over 50 communities with the CAM teams at some time. I've worked in dozens and dozens of their community, and they're perfectly capable of that job. The concern on the original proposal was that potentially some of the aspects of it could have been too burdensome for not just the CAM team, but anyone. Even Mr. Kolar expressed that to me. He said, look, my client's not trying to create so much red tape that our management cost goes up 3 times per month because of all these procedures. And the original proposal wasn't intended to do that, and I'm not inherently saying it did, but I never spoke out and said, don't implement this. I said, just make sure, don't do a cart before the horse. Don't put this in before we know it can be handled.
Okay.
But in answer to that question, I mean, any input's valuable. Yes, sir.
Yeah. On previous, going back through the history and having served on the board, and primarily dealing with the maintenance stuff on the buildings, trying to get contractors a number of years, 7 years on the board, trying to renegotiate or get bids for maintenance on this building. Probably 80% of the people we contacted refused to even be interested in doing maintenance on this.
That's a real life example of 2 burdensome procedures having an adverse effect for your community.
Second issue is in trying to appeal certain claimants or suits was we would respond as a board, but we wouldn't hear back or never gotten anything back from your opposing counsel for anywhere from 4 to 6 months to get a response. So at that time, I mean, what are we supposed to do?
Sure.
We try to proceed on, do what we're doing. And then we come back and we get slammed with it again.
I agree. And one of my solutions to eliminate that is to get things documented in a rigid form that we operate under. Because let's take a board that's got the best intentions in the world. If there's not a written procedure they're following, then if somebody alleges that there's improper conduct or favoritism being done, there's nothing to hang our hat on. There's nothing to prevail in court on other than them saying, hey, I was doing the right thing. Well, no, you weren't. He said, she said. But if there's a clear procedure that the reason this building was worked on is because it was triage number 2 and we had just finished triage number 1. So that's the goal. And you know, back to your point about contractors not want to come here. One of the clauses in the previous procedures that were proposed was that any work order above, I think it was $2,500, you'd have to solicit 3 bids from contractors. I'm not a contractor. I haven't built much with my hands in my life, to be honest with you. But I will tell you from being in this industry long enough that it's not easy to get a good contractor. It's not easy to get a contractor, and it's real hard to get a good contractor in. You need to do a bid process initially. You want to bring multiple roofers out to see who's good. But once you find a good roofer, when the next roof goes bad, you want to use that guy, unless you have a reason not to use that guy. So if you create a procedure where every time we're having a bid, that contractor's out. He doesn't want to be bid against every single time he gets another work order. But that's an easily solvable problem. Fine-tune the procedure so that doesn't happen. And then again, make sure we vetted them well on the forefront. We don't just want to run out and get another GAPS or whatever they were called.
I think with doing that, hiring a contractor, and getting the bid, and then continuing to hire that contractor, you'd have a warning situation. That contractor is not going to want to do sloppy work that would wind up causing him to get fired.
I agree. And if at any point you want to bid it out to other people, that's fine. But if you have a procedure that mandates that every time, I think that's a good example of overly complicated procedures that can become too burdensome.
Yeah.
Isn't the point of the management company to go get the contract?
Oh yeah, they would. They would be the ones to get the bid.
That's what we're trying to talk about
Right,
here.
but they would.
The management company gets the bids, gets
correct,
the contractors,
correct.
do all that.
These-
and that gets it out of Big Tree and the board and the
doesn't get it
favoritism
out of
and all
Big
the other
Tree.
BS.
Real quick though, again, I'm not going to be the one drafting these, although I'm going to be heavily involved. That will be part of our procedure.
Thank
the management
you.
company will
Thank
get
you.
bids. The management company will pay the
Thank
invoices.
you. Thank
The
you.
management company is going to be involved.
Yeah.
We just don't want to have to rebid it every single time there's a new project.
Well, the board, Tottenham's the Big Tree has to approve that.
Has to what, I'm sorry?
Has to approve that.
Oh, the board's got
Has to
to.
approve it.
Correct. The management company ultimately is the boss of, the management company is a client. The board is directing the management company. So yes, it's going to ultimately be board approved. But there's a way to create objectiveness by having the management company get the bids, have it done in the open. Hey guys, welcome to our meeting. Here are the 3 companies we vetted. These are the pros and cons of each. We're heavily leaning in favor of using company XYZ. And somebody in the back of the room says, wait a minute, don't use them. They worked on my house and they were crooks, they were terrible. And all of a sudden the board can choose not to use XYZ. This is all about creating those procedures that accomplish those goals, Chester.
2 words, objectivity and accountability.
That's what we're trying to achieve, right?
Accountability is huge.
Right.
Okay?
In what context are you saying that, though? That's our goal, right? Objectivity and
Jack,
accountability.
I've been through a lawsuit with these people. I went through it. I had water coming in my house. They had to pay me $5,000 just for the inside damage. And plus they had to fix the outside, okay? It was more money inside than it was outside.
Right.
But they allowed the building to get in such bad shape that it was god awful. But if you get these neighbors away from neighbors and turn it over to a management company who is objective and who has accountability, because you can go back on somebody and there's paperwork.
Right. That's precisely what we're trying to achieve.
That hopefully will be the answer, and get it, because it turns into neighbor against neighbor.
Sure.
And it's god awful.
You guys
And
been
it
that way
goes
for a long
on
time.
for 25 years. And nobody can ever get out of it.
And those are valid points, and I'd simply champion you that that's exactly what we're trying to achieve. That's exactly what we're trying to achieve.
They just remember that. Okay?
Absolutely,
Thank
and
you.
I'd love your input in this process. If you've had bad experiences, share that in this process so we can incorporate those bad experiences and try to prevent them from happening again. We can't fix
Larry
time.
has had every opportunity for over a year to try to accomplish that, and he refused to do
But
it.
it sounds like 2 boards before him had the same
I'm sorry,
opportunity.
but there's not Lisa. I've lived here 16 years. This has been going on more than just the last year.
Well,
we can't
I'm
just
talking about
blame it on-
last year
No,
when
Lisa,
I
I'm
was
not
on
done
the board
talking.
with
She was
him,
talking, you intruded.
She did it to me
and
last
he
time too.
refused
Stop it.
to get a management company involved in our building maintenance.
But-
I had this conversation with him. He then put on his website that we're
His
paying
website?
for. his
Just
website
let her finish, though, everyone have a chance to talk.
because he unauthorized Bill Jasper to put anything on the website or anyone else. He is the only one who has access to the website, and he put on there that he never knew anything about the mediation agreement until just now when Bill Jasper
Okay.
drug it up out of the dirt,
Right,
and that's a lie.
But with all due respect, this one, Larry,
I have an email dated from 2015, Larry,
Yeah, just
when
let
you
her talk.
stated in the email concerned about the mediation agreement. I have so many emails that prove all the lies that you
I know, but
have
Ms.
told.
Waters, if I could just ask you the question, and I'm not trying to invalidate your sentiments at all, but with all due respect, how do those stories help us accomplish what we're trying to do tonight?
That's right.
Because we need a president on the board who will be truthful, who other board members can serve with, because last year, he unauthorized me for no apparent reason.
There was a
Now,
reason,
he-
a good reason,
But,
What was the good
Ma'am,
because you
reason?
stunk at what you were doing.
I know, but
No,
this stuff doesn't
apparently I was
matter.
the only one who did anything in here for, in 4 months. I did more in here, Carol, than any board member
Yeah, really?
ever.
Yeah, how long have you lived in here?
Hey, guys,
So how do you know what you've done?
Let Sean speak,
Yeah, but-
let's get it in order, guys.
Yeah, again, Ms. Waters, I respect your sentiments and I don't deny them at all. I don't know if they're true or not, but my point is that I asked how do those sentiments help us achieve this? And your goal was, well, we need a better president. That can't happen until the next election. So we got to work with this
It
board.
can.
You could recall, if you want to do a community recall, I
Yes.
encourage you to do that. That's a right you have under Florida statute.
Yeah.
But absent a successful recall, Larry Kahn's your president. Larry Kahn's going to be the one directing, not directing, it's the board as a whole, but Larry Kahn will
You
be the
mean
president.
being the
of board.
dictator.
But he's not going to be able to be a dictator under these procedures. That's why we're creating them. Again, the personal animosity, I'm not saying it's not valid, but it's not going to help us starting tomorrow.
Well,
This one each other hand in the air for
I
quite some time. Ask her.
hadn't seen her hand, ma'am. I apologize.
Well, let me add a point here. Good. This maintenance procedure, this resolution that we have on maintenance, does talk about the idea that we have an assessing and what needs to be done, and then there's also a financial piece to it, where we determine that we have the money to pay for it. And you know, in a budget cycle within a corporation, departments come up with a budget that says, I'm gonna do this and this and this. You know, then they look at the money, now we can't give you all of that money.
Oh, I agree.
You can't cutbacks,
Yeah,
you know, so that whole process.
And the procedure that was, I believe, drafted by Mr. Jasper was really well thought out and really comprehensive. Maybe that is the procedure. Maybe it's that or a slightly different flavor of that. I mean, that was a heck of a start. And that's the exact kind of things we need to work out. And no doubt you're going to be confined by financial constraints. You know, that's going to happen. There's only so much we could be done. We would have waved a magic wand and fixed all your buildings 5 years ago. Man, you've been waiting a long time. Sorry. I didn't see your hand. I apologize.
We had an annual meeting, we elected 7 board members, 5 of whom have resigned. If any or all of them wanted to come back to the board, what would be the procedure for them doing that?
If anybody's interested in serving, whether the previous 5 directors or anybody that wasn't elected in November, all they have to do is let Larry or Chester know, because within the next very short time frame, they're going to be appointing 5 people to fill those seats. So I'd encourage you, if you're interested, or anyone else in this room, whether you're a director or not, to throw your hat back in the ring, and they'll be appointing 5. Under Florida law, they've got the right to appoint 5. It's unfortunate because you had 5 who were elected, and whether you like your leaders or not, that's what democracy is all about. They were elected. Now we're not going to have that. We're going to have 2 elected and 5 appointed, but such is the situation we find ourselves.
I'd like everybody here to consider themselves a nominating committee and go out and find.
Absolutely. Doesn't have to be folks in this room.
I just want the 5 back to me.
I wish everybody had resigned as well.
How much more costly will it be to take on these other duties for a property management company?
You know, we haven't got there yet. I think if we create the right procedures, and I don't want to speak for Bob, but if we create the right procedures, that both want to accomplish our goals, but are also workable and realistic and feasible for the management company, perhaps there'll be no increase in cost. We just need to evaluate that, make sure, but I can't say that. If we create a whole bunch more work for Bob's company, by the nature of business, that rate's gonna have to. Or if you decide to move on to another management company, if you have very onerous procedures, they're gonna quote you a really high price. So that's something that's gonna have to be worked out with Bob, but my hope is, and maybe it's not feasible, but my hope is we can do both. We can create procedures that solve our problem, but they can also be things that don't put a whole bunch of extra work. It wasn't about creating work for a management company. It was about getting rid of favoritism, creating transparency, having objective procedures that can't be manipulated by whoever's on the board. Those don't inherently require a bunch of work. That was part of the reason I was concerned about the possible burden of the proposed procedures. And I didn't speak out against them. I just said, make sure these aren't too onerous that it's going to cause a problem. I think you can find that sweet spot in the middle, but I don't know. That's going to be part of this process.
Good.
Sir.
During our last meeting at the pavilion a few weeks ago, I went through great pains to describe one of the proposals that the board of 7 were working on. And myself in particular, I have put together a statement of work, a request for proposal, short RFP, and explain what this RFP was all about. Now, we currently have a management company called CAM. Their contract has an expiration date. So the board members decided, well, let's take a look at putting together a request for proposal that we can send out, and I identified 4 different management companies, Signature being one of them, CAM being one of them, and 2 others, to the people that were there at the meeting. You were there, you heard it, so you know about the RFP. Excuse me, you know about the effort we've been putting in to comply with the intent of the ambiguous MSA and go out and put a proposal together delineating what we, as homeowners of Big Tree, want a management company to do for us. That proposal was completed as a 21-page document. I had Bill Jasper put it up on the website so that the homeowners can go look at it. This is what we're working on to comply with the intent, however vague, of the MSA, to go out and put this proposal out there, because today we don't know if he's charging us a fair market price. He very well could be. But unless we take that request for proposal and go to 3 additional management companies and say, this is what we want, and we broke it down by category, each category having a handout, what they're responsible for, what they're responsible for giving us. Work order process is a typical example. We've been working very closely with Casey at the CAM, and we're trying to close the loop on identifying invoices with work order numbers so that the cost is charged back to the work order. So now we have a running total of how much it costs to fix leak A or sidewalk B. So the team has been working on that. And again, that is in draft format. It's 21 pages. It's up on the website. It's been up there, and we presented it during our last meeting at the pavilion. Unfortunately, we had a very sparse group, and not as large as this one, where we can get that information out. Subsequent to that, we got hit with the litigation paperwork. We got hit with no D&O coverage. So no board member in their right mind is going to sit there and expose their families and assets without coverage. And now we're talking, well, let's shovel backwards and see if we can get this coverage. Well, you're not going to get that coverage, or people to volunteer, unless you have the coverage in place. But you homeowners should know that that team of 7 have been working on a proposal to go out and send it to 4 management companies and have them all bid, including the CAM, because they're the incumbent and they should have an opportunity to bid on it as well. There were going to be sealed bids coming back. We had a selection matrix that we put together that it's just a numerical matrix. Did they comply with this? Did they want to do that? They did not want to do that. And whoever the top point getters were well, they're gonna be the first forerunners to get the proposal. Except we have to go back and look at the matrix and identify what didn't they want to do for us and how important is it to us. You waited. Okay. And then you come up with a selection process, you present it to the homeowners, and here's the process. Here's what we saw. That's out there. And that happened in 20 days.
Absolutely. You deserve it. And I commend the group of you seven for the effort on that and the effort on several other fronts. I was watching, I was reading the emails, I was seeing the documents. You guys put an extraordinary amount of effort into these exact kind of things, and you're to be commended for that. I would make one comment to you that, again, the boogeyman of personal liability became so large that everybody fled the board. And I don't criticize anybody who decided to make that decision. I would simply take slight issue with your statement that without D&O coverage, you'd be a fool to expose your family assets. I have 0% concern that Chester tomorrow could be hit with personal liability based on what we're doing right now. Zero. Even without D&O coverage in place, because there's no improper conduct. Now, if we leave here and go in a back room and say, you know what, that was all lies, let's just do this all on our own accord, yes, then I'd be very concerned about that lack of D&O coverage, but that's not where we're headed. So I don't mean to refute you, I don't want that sentiment to send a message to everybody, don't run until you get D&O coverage.
I understand, but beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right?
Sure.
And that's a very subjective statement where anyone can bring a lawsuit at any time. The point is, we don't want to spend our time going through lawsuits and playing bullets and bracelets here.
Sure. If you're referring to the mere procedure of being sued, then I can understand. But the way you phrased it was always exposing your family's assets, and I'd strongly submit to you that your family's assets are not exposed due to a lack of D&O coverage as long as there's not improper conduct. But I do agree that we need to fill that gap. I just don't want there to be the sentiment that none of you should run until we have D&O coverage, because that's just not the case.
But I want these homeowners to understand
Agreed.
Where the people that we're coming from. These
Absolutely.
are good people.
Oh, no doubt.
And their hearts are in the right places. Constant negativity, threat of lawsuits. You know, it was just a little bit too much for them to handle when they're volunteering their time.
And there was a very strong sentiment painted that tomorrow the 7 members of the board could have to write checks. And I think that was, while it was a valid concern, and that's what started this whole thing in November. I mean, it came to my desk as, is there any way this could ever lead to liability? That was the question presented to me that got my involvement in this whole matter. While there was a valid discussion we needed to have, I think the idea that the exposure was imminent was false. I don't think the exposure was imminent. There could be exposure down the road if we don't conduct ourselves properly, but it wasn't imminent. Having said that, you can't prevent somebody from suing you, and that in itself may not be worth it to a director. So I appreciate that as well. Yeah, I think you've been holding me along.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, sir.
Going back to just board procedures on making the decision to do something or not, the president does not have overriding powers. It's on the majority of the board.
Absolutely.
So in other words, if 5 of the board members vote for this, the president and 1 other is against it.
Absolutely.
He's overruled.
I had that conversation this morning. Not your community, a different board called me and said, this board member, I don't remember if it was president or not, he's doing this all on his own and nobody else wants him to do it, this, that, and the other. So that's really easily solved. Notice a special meeting in 48 hours and have a majority vote overruled. No single director can control the corporation, no doubt about it. Yes, sir.
Is this mitigation agreement not clear? I mean, it's pretty much factual, right? What we signed is going to be agreed to.
Oh, it's a legally binding document.
Well, why, if we had to have a management company do that, why didn't we have them do it the way that it said? I mean,
that's a good question. Why wasn't there?
That should have been presented to the management company, said this is what we need.
Right, that should have happened the day after that document was signed.
Yeah, how come it's 3 years later?
Why is it 3 years later? I have no clue. But again, I think marketing on the past doesn't
Why
help.
don't you ask Bob Woods? He's sitting right there.
I don't know, but again, the sentiment of focusing on what's happened in the past will not help us move positively forward. We can sit here and bash the hell out of each other all night at what happened in the past, and we'll get nowhere.
I mean, Pansy is one that was hired because of the agreement.
I don't know, man. I wasn't there. All I know is we're working to solve that problem now. That's what this initiative is.
Maybe he can answer the question.
Well, I'm open to doing another forum. I think this has been a beneficial process. It's important everybody get together. I mean, if you want to, I mean, we don't even have to have a board meeting. If you want to get together and chat about this stuff, I'm happy to I'm happy to bring my time. As long as we don't conduct association business, it doesn't have to be a formal meeting. So we can get together and discuss anytime we want. I'd be happy to do that. Yes, Maria?
Only one time. You're wonderful, but your hourly rate, we really don't want to have anyone we have.
Fair enough. I do have the lowest hourly rate in the state of Florida, but I agree. All hourly rates are costly. Just so you all know, I charge $150 an hour. I don't charge for travel time, so if I drive here and I'm here for a half hour, I charge you $75 for the meeting. I don't charge for most emails. I don't charge for most phone calls. I don't charge when I go to court. I charge for bare bones legal work. So there's nobody in the state of Florida that's costing me time with the HOA company. And I'm proud of it. I'm proud of it. But 150 an hour is still a lot of money. I'm respectful of that as well.
Well, I think the next step is to move forward with your proposal and start putting all this together, and then have a follow-up meeting with the results of what everybody decides. We can have a committee, an ad hoc committee, as you mentioned, go through the issues. We already got some guidance. Luis has already put together the RFP. We can review everything and hopefully agree upon it and get it moving forward.
And just to show how sincere we are about this being an information session and not a mandate today, other than the proposals that the group of 7 put together in the last couple of months, we don't have any sort of document started on what this is going to look like. This was truly the genesis of this project tonight, getting everybody on board of where we're headed.
Sean, it's all in the RFP.
Oh, I didn't mean that way. You guys have done a lot of work. I just mean Larry, Chester, and I have not met and talked about this.
Procedures that you're talking about?
Yeah, and I've seen them. I've seen the document I have here, and they were great. And I think that's why I reinvent the wheel. Let's start with those, and if any of them's problematic, let's work it out. Let's get input from everybody who wants to give input, and let's make this the best procedure we can, and then let's implement it and operate on it.
Let's just say, for talking sake, that we didn't have an RFP. What does it stop anybody from calling a management company out of the blue, or the 4 that Luis talked about, and saying, would you please give us a proposal?
Well, anybody can call management company, but I will say in the
Show us what
industry.
you can do for us.
Yeah, you generally do need RFPs though, because the management company doesn't know what you're asking them.
Okay.
They need to know the parameters on which they're bidding.
Okay, but when can we do this? We have to have the D&O in place before we can contact management companies?
You can call management companies tomorrow if you want to.
Oh, okay. No, well, I can't. Can we?
You're good.
Can we have our first? Well, who will? Who will? Can I get somebody to say they will?
The homeowners go and
We
look
need
at
a
the
management company.
and everything that they want as homeowners in the community is
I would agree. Ma'am, a lot of your sentiments are the project he was working on. So I encourage you guys to look up on that.
I'm not looking over there.